Hello,
We're so
everyone.
sorry about the confusion that was happening.
Yeah, new uh, an error correction.
Yeah, was it asking for a
Like,
password?
yeah.
I think the settings just rechanged on it, asking for a passcode on it, but very sorry about the confusion for the last 20 minutes on that. Um, yeah, we'll wait for potentially a couple other people to come, but if not, we can just start doing discussions side if people would like. Hopefully, people have managed to look into Unit 1, where we're looking at understanding our roles in borehole drilling projects. Just as a reminder, just in case people are unsure about how you end up getting your certificate at the end of it, there's three requirements that GW Global Water Center asks for you guys to do. It's to complete all the lessons and activities. You'll see that as a blue tick on the side of your course overlay. Um, for discussions, you should have a discussion post that is around 75 to 150 words, and you should also respond to at least one other post from another participant. Quite a few of you have managed to do that online. Sorry, are you able to see my screen? Um, we don't know why a passcode was asked on it. I think it's a new safety feature that Zoom asked, so we're just going to change it from now on to keep it as the same password if we can. Um, yeah, and going back, final exam, you must score 80% or higher to pass, but you can take the exam as many times as you need, and all those three requirements must be done for you guys to have a certificate on it. So I thought we'd try and do this as an open discussion. Hopefully we should have seen from Unit 1 the 7 phases that Odessa had to go through. The phase 1 to 7, planning and preparation, doing a site verification, pre-mobilization, and then mobilizing to the site, doing the drilling, construction, and development, which normally most well drillers or any sort of organization thinks that that's the only important parts of drilling, construction, and development, and not really realizing the other 4 beforehand, and then demobilization and getting the documentation and handover afterwards. Did anyone have any questions about the 7 project phases that was involved that Odessa, James, Nia, and Coffee were going through um, in the scenario that we're doing there? Or is there any questions that people want to ask about those 7 phases? Well, I kind of want to make this an open conversation with everyone because I know that hopefully through chatting with one another, we might learn from one another about how we can go through the 7 phases as drilling, procurement, and contract management. Or maybe the second point that I had was I took a screenshot. I know it's quite hard to see, so you might not be able to see it, of the drilling project planning and preparations checklist, which hopefully might help you as the manager in terms of thinking what steps you need to do in order to get a drilling project going. Um, this is tried to make it as concise as possible in order for us to easily go through a plan and then prep it to make sure that we can get everything down from project initiation and preparation to thinking about community and the area selection, what your team looks like and who will be doing the different sections of it. Also wondering how, especially with engagement and management of the community and stakeholders, because there's a lot of different groups in play whenever we go and drill, to even thinking about the hydrogeological investigations, and finally with the project procurement and contract award. Was this different to people what they were expecting? Has this been helpful? Uh, yeah, the floor is yours, guys.
Yeah, yeah, this is Maya.
Hi, Maya.
Yeah. This has been helpful because for me, I'm already involved in borehole drilling projects where I'm working in Malawi. I'm working for Orange Charles Africa. Yeah, but I think one of the things that I've learned so much is in our organization, most of the times, most of the tasks, they are handled by maybe one or two people. Yeah, but I think from the lessons from the unit one, I could understand that there are different laws. For example, in my team, I think I am the manager, and then we have a field officer, and then we have the country director who approves everything else, and then we have an accountant as well. But we don't have the procurement, the legal officers, the field liaisons, the community liaisons, and the other positions. So it was quite eye-opening for me to understand that there are also other people that can be in this team that are equally important in management of the of drilling projects.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Thank you so much, Maya. Yeah, I mean, when you have the availability of having, like you said, if you could have a legal team as well, and being able to have multiple team members to do it, that makes it amazing for project planning. But sometimes you might not be able to, which is why this is just a guide. It isn't a like be all or end all. You must follow it. But thinking about all the different stakeholders in that group, and if you don't have it, how you can compensate for it also makes it super helpful when you're thinking about project planning.
Awesome.
Yeah, Josh, I
Did
also wanted to
yeah.
comment on that one. Maya mentioned that they don't have anyone legal. Um, One of the things that you could try and look into is to get one legal person to help you work through the contracts, because contracts usually the legal aspects of a contract are usually some sections, and you're just changing the specifications of that particular contract. So it's possible for you to just at some point engage a legal person who makes sure that your contract is watertight and it's legally binding. And then after that, once you have a draft contract or a contract template, it then helps you as you go along to just edit that same template and then you can use it. But having that legal eye is important, especially when you're beginning, so that you've got a template that you're going to be using. That will not be a problem in the future.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Fadzai. Yeah, I think I might try that in the future so that maybe we can be able to have those legally binding contracts as needed. Yeah. Yeah, but thank you very much for that.
Did anyone have anything else that they thought was quite striking or that they didn't do? I know from reading some of the discussion forums that some people were really thinking about, especially when looking back at, oh, that is not that screen. Looking back at the 7 phases, that the drilling, construction, and development was like the main thing that they were thinking about, and being like, oh, I didn't realize there was all these other sides before it. I mean, I know that we can say Douglas is just here as well, from Hidrológica in Nicaragua, that a lot of team members, whenever we go and work with the client, whether it is a community or it is like a private drilling like client, they don't realize that we want to do, from even in the planning side, doing a pre-geological study of the site or where we're looking at, rather than just going out blind. Because I think, like Adissa was saying in her scenario in that package, that they had some dry boreholes because they just went and did a borehole and then hoped for the best and hoped that there would be water. But by having proper planning beforehand, you end up saving so much money in the long term, because you're not just drilling a borehole, which for a driller, they're super happy because they get paid to do just the borehole. But then as our roles that we want to do a good drilling procurement, you want to make sure that it ends up going towards the community, and actually them having a successful well in the end. Did anyone have any thoughts about that, or personal experiences as well where that was the case? where there may have been some friction maybe with the drilling contractor, and like we definitely have multiple experiences of that from even just working here in Central America.
Actually, last week or this
Yeah,
week.
at literally last week and this week, we've been having some issues with a contractor who doesn't have actually a contract with the client, and it was all completely verbal, nothing written, nothing set in stone. And then we were going in there as the consultants, being like, "No, you should be doing this. This isn't to a legal standard." They were just trying to make, in effect, as much money as possible without any responsibilities.
In fact, they're stepping out. They're stepping out the job. So that means that it's gonna take longer for the client to get his job done, and then it takes longer to satisfy his need for water. So that's because they don't have a contract at the beginning. So that causes so many troubles, in line.
Yeah, Maya.
Yeah, I've experienced something similar like that earlier in my career. We used to like just do more of a handshake with the with the contractors, and then we could find ourselves in situations. For example, we were usually drilling boreholes and installing AfriDev hand pumps. Yeah, so unfortunately, we would find that the contractor maybe wants to use maybe fewer bags of cement when they are doing the civil works, and sometimes maybe even the guidelines that we had, like for the Ministry of Water in Malawi, sometimes you'd, for example, there are some guidelines which say maybe the apron for the AfriDev pump should be of this length, width should be of this size. Those things were not, because there was no contract. We would find ourselves that maybe we have the standards, but they were not written anywhere for the contractor to follow. So we would find ourselves that in the field we are having arguments with the contractor. Why have you done this in this way? Why have you done it in this way? And then the contractor, they were just doing the things the way they want. They know they can. Yeah. So it was one of the key challenges until we started using some kind of a contract just to guide them in terms of what they are supposed to be, what is supposed to be done. Yeah.
Even having a contract, sometimes it requires you to meet personally with the contractor and read it with them and make sure that they understand it. Because also we've had the cases where we have a contract, we have standards. When we hand it to them, they return it signed, and they never read it, right? And then whenever it's time for us to verify the deliverables, they're not accomplishing any of them, and it's because they didn't read it. And then in the end, they're surprised that we're asking for so many things, right? And and then it seems like they don't. It's the first time that they're hearing that thing, even though they signed up the contract.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Douglas. I think that is really a big challenge. I think part of what we are also encouraging is the pre-bid meetings. Depending on how you would handle the different contracts. Here we were encouraging that people can actually do pre-qualification. So before you do any pre-qualification, you are putting out a bid out there to the communities, and then to contractors, and then you say, before you actually give us a quote, can you come? We discuss, we tell you what we want, and then you go back and then you can draft a quotation, and then the contract also follows. That helps to ensure that the contractors actually understand what we want them to do well before, because sometimes even the terms of reference that we're putting out there as we're requesting for quotations, they're not even reading them, they don't even understand them. So that's where we also see the importance of having those pre-bid meetings and ensuring that the contractors actually know what we want before they even sent through a contract.
Yeah, and it saves so much headache in the future as well if that is all kept. So yeah, so that is quite an important thing about contracts. Did anyone have any other parts that they found quite interesting about the scenarios, personal parts that they ended up relating to, or I'm just trying to think. We can go back to the other slide, thinking about the like planning and preparation checklist. We kind of want to make this into a conversation with you guys, trying to be able to like bounce ideas off, trying to help one another, give advice where possible, or also just sharing frustrations as well, of things that seem to be anywhere in the world with all this.
Just be aware that you're not alone, and it happens everywhere. I mean, everywhere I've been, it happens the same thing. So we can relate to your situations as well.
Okay, if not, I can go a little bit more in detail about the 6 steps that we had for the preparation checklist. I know that we talked about quite briefly, but also quite importantly, about the contract management side in terms of if you define in step 1 project initiation and preparation, if you define the overall project objectives, methods, deliverables, and reporting requirements, this is especially key for the contractor. Whoever is going to do your drilling, even if it is that your own team does it, or you subcontract it out with the people who are bidding it, that they know exactly what they are required to maintain to actually deliver. This makes your jobs so much easier, that you know exactly what depth they're going to, you know what sort of like borehole size drill bits that they're going to be using, you know what you're expecting, you know when they're going to give you your deliverables, whether it's like, I don't know, we have it where every time we do like a new 10 feet, then we do a rock sample or something, and then we're sort of giving feedback to whoever the driller is, to us. But it's just however you've decided to lay it out, even if it is just from the drilling, but the overall thing of what the community will be doing, what everyone will be doing, it makes your life easier, and you have the scope of the work. The key stakeholders obviously involved is important, but then as Fadzai had said, if they're doing the bidding beforehand, then that might have to wait until that whole side is done. And then most importantly, the budget. If you don't have the budget to do it, then you're going to end up being like only half the borehole has been drilled before you run out of money. Or if you have any complications, how would that be developed onwards? Do you have a backup for that? Or depending on how you do it. Step 2, probably the most important part, is the community, institution, and or municipality selection. You definitely have to collaborate with the local authorities and government. The last thing that you need is that you start drilling, you've got all the paperwork done, you've had all the budgeting, you've got your drilling team ready, you get on site, and then all of a sudden someone from the government just goes, nah, you can't do that. And the next thing you know, you are waiting until you get all that paperwork done. Whether that's the community has to do it, depending on how you've decided to do your contract with them, and then they sort out all the paperwork, and once that's confirmed, you can carry on. Or if it's part of your role, you have to have a good connection with the local water authority, the local government, make sure you've got all the permits ready. Or if that's the drilling contractor's role, if they have to do all that, you just need to make sure who's doing that, especially when you go out on site. Yeah. And then what's the second point on that? Consult communities during early assessments to confirm feasibility and readiness. Yeah, for that pre-site selection, when you're going there beforehand, if you've done your desk study and stuff and then know roughly where you're going, we personally try and go to the site as well, rather than one of the drillers, or if we can, with the drilling team as well. Because sometimes you end up going there and then there isn't a road, so you don't have access to bring your stuff through. Literally, I think it was 2 weeks ago when I went, I had to walk 4 different like hills where there was no cars, no anything, and they're like, yeah, we'll cut a road through. And then you're like, okay, but this is just going to delay the whole process, because if the drill rig can't go through, then you can't drill a borehole down there. Like, I really appreciate the optimism, but like, you have to do it realistically. You need to have that early assessment to confirm that it is feasible to go drill at that location that you've selected. Yeah, team assembly, step 3. Maya had pointed out as well, having a multidisciplinary project team, whether it is from the legal side, you have your hydrogeologist, if that's possible. If not, being able to get some advice from someone, where you have the finance as well, the accountant, the rest of the team, undertaking all the technical, financial, legal, operational, and social aspects of that drilling project. By having all those sectors working in conjunction with another, it makes the success a lot more likely for drilling that borehole. And then, yeah, especially in that, knowing what everyone's clear roles, responsibilities, the decision making, and knowing if something goes wrong, what are you authorized to do, is probably the most important part, so you don't delay any rest of that process. And then, yeah, and then knowing how your communication protocols and coordination systems will be. Seems to be around the world, WhatsApp seems to be the best way to be able to contact with one another. I know that's obviously like the obvious one, but knowing who do you need to like raise your questions, comments, queries, concerns to, so that you're not wasting any time. Just potentially, if Douglas is my boss, then I know, hey, something's gone wrong. Do I have authorization to do this? Yes. Then you know immediately that you can carry on with that. And then, yeah, ensure that there is a sufficient budget and time available for all tasks to be completed by the team. Knowing that you're supposed to get to a certain stage by this time, and then having that sort of like Gantt chart, or like week 1, we're expected to do this. Pre-drill, we're expected to get all these stages done. And then when you go out into the mobilization stage and drilling, then you know roughly how long it should be taking as well, as long as there's no like issues. But then you should also take into factor that if you're expecting stuff to go wrong, then roughly knowing how long that will take as well helps you then go to the community and tell them, hey, we've had sort of issues with this. This might take a little bit longer. We're expecting it with delays to take this long. But constantly being in communication with that community, with your client. We have complications all the time. We can't find parts and something's gone wrong, so we have to wait. But we're still telling the client, we're still telling the community, hey, really sorry, but we're keeping you in the loop, just to say that we're not pretending that like everything's fine, but that we've had some setbacks. This is the earliest that we reckon we'll get to you by. You're the first one on the list. We're going to go do that. Yeah, step 4, community engagement and stakeholder management. Again, I think the big thing from what you're seeing from all 6 steps is communication. Liaising and collaborating and communicating with the community, the local authorities, any national requirements. If there are no national requirements, going for the best like world standards. We try and keep to like the Australian and the American codes, because Nicaragua doesn't really have one for doing boreholes, especially for water well drilling. So we try and go for the Australian and the American standards for that. I think you can find it on the National Groundwater Association as the details for that. And then, yeah, ensure that there are mechanisms in place for all this to be managed. Hopefully this isn't new stuff, guys. This PDF is available on the Learn Global Water Center website, on our drilling and procurement section. It is on that checklist on the side, available documents at the very bottom, and it should have been on the Unit 1 as a link as well. I haven't just magically made this out of thin air. It is in the document. Step 5, yeah, hydrogeological investigations and site selection. Douglas always gets into my brain the whole time, being like, the first thing that you always do is a pre-site assessment. You always do a survey online if you can. There's so much info available on Google Earth. You can just look at rough groundwater probability that it'll be there, and if you can do fracture tracings, then that all helps with that hydrogeological investigation, so you have a rough idea that there should be a good potential for water to be there, and that should always be done before you actually go and drill in those planned borehole locations. Yes, if there's any reports available, even if it's like 10 years old, it's still viable because someone's done the research, someone's taken the time to do that hydrogeological report with recommendations, and it might flag potential issues. If someone's done that before and then they go, like what we're doing, oh, there's quite a high arsenic source around this area, you're like, oh, okay, maybe I don't want to drill there. Or if we are, we're going to have to be constantly testing to make sure if we're hitting that aquifer. If we are, what are our steps going to be? Because the last thing you want to do is you've done all that drilling, but then the water's not usable. And then you have to go through the whole filtering side, or at some point you can't, because it is that contaminated. So yeah, so doing a pre-site study makes this so much more helpful. And then yeah, feedback to communities, again, that whole communication side with the communities, the local authorities, making adjustments where required, and then trying to go through those national regulations again. This helps with that preliminary borehole design, so you know roughly what you think you're going to be doing. If you hit an aquifer or water source so much earlier, happy days, but then you're still going down and wanting to confirm that that is all fine. Step 6, project procurement and contract award. Yeah, again, reviewing the site reports that we had from beforehand and any potential issues. Okay, national regulations again. But having that preliminary borehole design, then that helps with the bidding process as well, because then the drilling contractors roughly know, okay, we're thinking that it's going to be maybe this many feet or this many meters that we're going to be drilling. But then what are their steps going to be in their contract of, if we still haven't managed that there, will we be going further? You have to have that already in that contract management, knowing, because then you can then compare all different drilling contractors, if you have that, to know which one the best one that you want to do is. Yeah, advertise widely to reach qualified drilling contractors. I think the qualified is probably the hard part in any country. Like what we were just saying with this last week, one of the guys, it's a new drilling crew, and we never heard of them before, and even they didn't really know what they were doing either. And then that was a bit of a shock, because they were very confidently saying, yeah, we've always done this. Okay, how many boreholes have you drilled? 4. And you're like, right, mate, okay. Yeah. You might have 4 boreholes under your belt, but how many were successful? None of them. Okay, let's go through a couple standards of this is not our, like, we made these rules, this is where we found them, this is the groundwater's like recommendations. What do you drill in? Oh, we do this. That's too small, because then when you put your casing, that doesn't work. So it's like we're wanting to develop them as well, but then they're not actually a qualified drilling contractor, which then made the clients that we're consulting for, they're now delayed by up to who knows however many more months until they find a new drilling contractor to go do the required borehole diameter that they need in order to have a successful well. So yeah, having not only to advertise widely for drilling contractors, but looking at their qualifications, seeing how they do their whole process to know whether or not you can trust them for any future work as well is quite important. As Douglas said, not necessarily a bidder conference if you don't have that choice, but definitely going through with that drilling contractor your expectations, your requirements, and answering any questions that they have makes it a lot more successful for that borehole, because then rather than finding out after they've mobilized to the place that they can't do the requirements that you're asking them, saves whoever it is a massive headache for that. Yeah, forming an evaluation committee with transparent criteria. What's that term called? Like, where there's always like the devil's advocate. Yes, Fadzai, sorry.
Thanks, Josh. I just wanted to emphasize on the point that you mentioned of making sure we've got the qualified drilling contractors. Part of it also is ensuring that they have the equipment that we want. Because sometimes we are just going to ask a driller to drill, but we haven't specified what sort of diameter of a borehole we want, what sort of diameter of the casing that we want. And so that then says even the depth of the borehole, that then determines the equipment that we require. So once we know all that, it also helps us to know who is qualified in terms of the equipment that they actually have. do you want to do mud drilling or air drilling? Are they capable of doing all that? So yeah, that's also quite an important step to just look at the equipment that they have versus what we actually want to get done.
That's a good point,
Yeah.
Fatsai, because it requires a little bit of searching from our side, right? Because most of the contractors, they're going to say, yes, I can, even though they don't have the capabilities, right? So it'll like comes down to us like basic questions, right? So if it's going to be an air drilling, you're going to ask them, what size compressor do you have? And probably they don't even have a compressor. Or what size of pump do you have if they're gonna do mud drilling, and probably they don't even have a mud pump, right? So, but they'll say yes anyway, right? And once you already sort out if they have the capable equipment, also verified if it's fit for the purpose, if it's leaking, if it's working, if it's in good shape, if it's not going to break down as it's going to, it's doing a drilling for you, right? So all those things you need to assess it first before you select any drilling company.
Yeah. Again, using the same example as last week, their air compressor was way too small.
Yeah.
The requirement of 500 feet drilling, so 120, I think 3.8 meters, I can't remember off the top of my head, around that depth, and then expecting them to do it in an 8-inch diameter in order to put a 4-inch casing. They did not have the air compressor strong enough to be able to to push out all that chippings, especially when they were going to go down, I think, from 150 feet onwards. The air compressor was so small that the CFM that they needed to push out would not even get those chippings out. So it was already like, you can't do the job. But because they didn't have a contract in place,
they didn't do any like bidding process or like sorting out process, so they got stuck at 50 feet.
Yeah.
Not even like, it was like 1% of the
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Maya, sorry, this isn't showing our frustrations. We're just like, you save yourself so much headache if you just like
Yeah. On the same what we have been talking about, Douglas. Like in Malawi, it's very common to find that somebody who calls themselves a contractor, but they don't have a drilling rig, and then it's like they are more like a middleman, whereby maybe they get a contract and then they outsource, like they would call the actual contractor who has got a rig to drill the borehole on their behalf. So with such situations, there are always challenges, because I remember this other time we find that we have agreed with a contractor, and then that you should drill our borehole during this time from this maybe starting maybe on Monday, such a week, and then we found out that the contractor was not available on site on such a date. And then following it up, then we understood that the guy didn't even have the rig, the drilling rig. He was just maybe he was trying to borrow from somebody else so that they can come, and then maybe they were not able to get a drilling rig on time. So it was a crazy situation for us. So we learned it a hard way, and it's very interesting that most of the issues that you are talking about, they are also similar here in Malawi. All over the years, I've seen such situations that you have been talking about. Yeah, and the other issue I think which I've also remembered when you were talking about the community, there are land issues, like where are you going to drill the borehole? For us, most of the times it's like when we go, because we are a non-government organization, and then we go there to the communities to drill a borehole. The expectation is that the community will provide land where we are going to drill the borehole, and they will also provide some materials, for example, quarry stone, sand, as their contribution to the project. Yeah, so if there is no proper agreement, if there is no proper due diligence with the community in terms of the expectations and the like, we find that maybe comes the day to drill, the community doesn't have sand, the community doesn't have any other materials that they need to provide. And in some instances, we have seen situations whereby maybe the chief gave us some land, and then maybe the land was not necessarily the chief's. The land maybe was somebody's it was somebody's farm or something, and then we start to have issues later on after we have maybe drilled a borehole. We are midway drilling the borehole. Those have been the issues. So it's really important to have those discussions with the communities and agree on certain terms in terms of what is expected from an organization or a drilling project. Yeah.
No, definitely.
Thank
As
you.
in, yeah, thank you very much, Maya. Fadzai, do you
Come.
want to?
All right. Thanks a lot. So what I just wanted to talk about the contractors who don't have drilling rigs. So we call them briefcase drillers because they actually don't have any drilling equipment. So just I'll talk about a short incident that we encountered where an organization actually contracted a briefcase driller, and then they expected them to drill. However, they came, they drilled, and then once they were supposed to then continue drilling, the contractor is like, no, this is not what I signed up for. And I think the entire project ended up taking about a year to complete one well because of all that. The actual owner would then go drill other wells and say, okay, I'll come back 3 months later, the issues, etc. So one of the things that we also learned is that to verify some of the ways that you could actually verify is to have them submit a copy of the documents, the equipment documents, the registration documents, because usually it has the name of the company. So for example, if it's Hydrologica owning that rig, when they submit a registration certificate for that drilling rig, it has the Hydrologica name. So you are very sure whoever is bidding is the one who actually owns that drill rig. So that has been helpful. And then there's on another one, there's a question from Samuel who is saying why is it the national regulations, requirements, permit and compliance matters aren't set already on step 1? Just want to highlight my understanding. So maybe just to help to answer that, Samuel, part of it is actually maybe it hasn't been detailed in the defining the overall project objectives and methods in the project initiation and preparation. Those are the key things. In step 6, you'll see that it's now saying verify that all these are available. So these are things that we already have identified in step 1. And with the contractor, we are now verifying that they are compliant to all the requirements. So before we actually give a contract to a contractor, we're verifying that they have a permit to drill, they follow all the national standards, etc. So it's not that it's starting in stage 6, it has already begun in step 1, but this is a process of now verification in step 6. Thank you. Sorry for taking over, Josh. Back to you.
No worries. Yeah, where was I? No, I think step 6 is definitely, as Fadzai, you were saying, it is once you've done all the research beforehand, once you've done all the communication, once you've chatted to, is this viable, is this not, and you've got all those steps in place, then you are looking at, okay, now that I've got all that ready, can I now get this all written down? Can I now confirm that the contractor, as we've said, is able to do what they need? Have I got all the national water requirements, regulations, permits? Have I got that rough design ready? And is the contractor not only happy to do it, the drilling contractor, but are they also able to physically able to do it? And then you evaluate all those bids. If you've got 2 or 3 or 4, happy days, like that is awesome. Most of the times I think it is that you end up only having 1 or 2 that might be able to do it, or even just one, and then it makes you a bit limited to, great, you've tried to make it as transparent as possible, that we're trying to get the best bid out there, but then when only one drilling contractor can do it, then it makes it a bit harder. And then that's when you award the contract and issue that, hey, we're happy with you. If you're happy with this contract, we're happy to proceed with it. Because you've done all those steps, you've made sure that they know what they're expected to do and what the deliverables are, and you know what you need to check as well to confirm that. And then hopefully that then puts us in a good place for units 2, has that changed? I hope it has, of what to expect next, of looking at that full project team and reporting lines for this week, and thinking about the key roles, especially as the project manager, the finance side, the hydrogeologists, of what we were just talking about, of doing that desk study beforehand, but also confirming while they're drilling, the drilling supervisor and what they're expected to do, and then the whole legal side, as Maya had pointed out from before, of that would be super beneficial to have. And then, the most importantly, I think the community liaison, if it's a community borehole, is constantly being in contact with them, of knowing roughly what area you're thinking about doing it in. You go do the pre-site selection, you've got to know them quite well, and then you're constantly being in contact with them, knowing, hey, these are the timelines that we're looking at, this is when we're expected to get there. We would really appreciate some help, maybe having 3 or 4 people helping out, being able to direct where we're going, stuff like that. And then, yeah, thinking about tracking the action items and closing gaps between team members so everyone knows what their responsibilities are, is what this module will be looking into for this week. And then we can chat about that next week. Does anyone have any other questions, comments, concerns about the checklist that we were just talking about, or of this past Unit 1's 7 phases, brief general overview of what each phase should be doing, and what Adissa, James, Nia, and Coffee were going through in that scenario?
Greetings. I don't know if I'm audible enough.
Hello.
I don't know if I'm audible enough. Am I?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So my name is Nkomba. I actually had a question.
Yes.
I think it's in line with what Fadzai had earlier mentioned on having, potential drillers, producing the, drilling license. So how about a situation where, because, sometimes owning a rig is very much expensive. So in my line of work, I've seen certain contractors come together and have a lease agreement for a rig. And then when they do tender in tender in for some of these projects, they actually attach a lease agreement for a rig in some cases. And in other cases, a particular company might not have a rig in place, but they have a license to drill. So in this professional, in a professional of trying to deliver such projects, are these 2 ways of going about, procurement okay, or we just have to have a contractor that has the rig and that can do the job?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because we're in the very decent position where we own our rigs, as in the company owns the rigs, and we have our drillers as well. I don't know how they do it in other countries, but then in my head, I think it's in the contract management, as long as the drill rig owners and the contracted well drillers are in agreement. But then I don't know how that would look like in the contract with, you have that and knowing what responsibilities happens if something goes wrong with potentially breaking of the equipment or not knowing the equipment's limits. That might require the drilling company or the owners to have a course with the well drillers beforehand for them to operate the system so they're happy with it. And I don't know how the insurance on that side would work. I think that's more of a legal question that I'm not very well aware about, where they have a drilling company but drillers who have the license to drill, pero no saben cómo hacer. Tienen los perforadores, pero no tienen acceso al equipaje y ellos lo hacen juntos. dos diferentes compañías.
Oh yeah. So with the what's it called in I can't remember the name that they have. I know there's people that sells the well, but they don't have the drilling equipment. Yeah, I get that situation. We actually had that case once in Ghana, where we selected the company or the guy based on the equipment that they bring for the first drilling, and it was all good. But the second drilling, they sent a different drill rig, and it was all bad with that drilling rig. So yeah, that's a tough situation. What I would do is I would go directly to the company, right, and make an agreement with the company directly.
But then, if they don't have the license to drill, I don't know, Fadzai, do you have insight into that, or does anyone else have any insight into that? We've never experienced that from our side. Normally, the drill owners also have the drilling license to drill.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm actually
Sorry, go ahead.
surprised to hear that because I don't know how other countries do it, but from my experience, how a drilling license is actually awarded is they look at the drilling equipment that you have and then give you a drilling license. So I'm not too sure how it works in your country, Nkomba. Um, but yeah, it's a bit of a challenge because you want to make sure whoever then is going to have the contract is someone who's capable of doing the work. I understand where maybe for a particular project you can have several boreholes and then two contractors are coming together and they are partnering because maybe you want a person who has more than one drill rig. That is understandable. And then you've got different rigs. They all have been pre-qualified. You've seen them, you see that they work. And so you know that there's that partnership. I think that works. It just needs to make sure, one just needs to make sure it's all documented within the contract. But having someone who actually does not have a drill rig who partners with have someone who has a drill rig can be a bit tricky. I have not encountered such.
Yes, Maya.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. For me, I've encountered something similar. But in our case, it was an issue of the driller not having the drilling rig in the first place, and later on they said that the drilling rig was had an issue, and then for us now we had to wait until they secure another drilling rig for them to complete the job. But unfortunately, they were not telling us that the rig had an issue. They told us about the issue of the drilling rig very late after we have seen that there were a lot of delays in terms of how the time they were taking to complete the project. So, like here in Malawi, I think there are a number of those situations whereby they have maybe a license from the National Water Resources Authority, but they don't have a drilling rig. Yeah, so sometimes it's an issue of maybe they had a drilling rig when they were registered with the National Water Resources Authority, and then maybe later on maybe their rig is broken, or I don't know what really happens. But in our case, that was the situation. So we really had some challenges, and I would still recommend for someone to have a drilling rig before you award them a contract. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Maya, and thank you very much, Nkombo, as well, for pointing out sometimes issues happen that you can't even imagine happening, of where, you have two separate entities. There should be one in that, but I think from the sounds of it, it should be in the contract that you want to write out beforehand, if that is the only option you have, knowing what each roles and responsibilities and what happens if something goes wrong. If that is the only option you do actually have, then I think that might be one of the steps to do it, so that everything is legally covered as well. So if something goes wrong, people know what their responsibilities are, but then also knowing, because then at the end of the day, if you do all that and then the drill rig owners aren't happy with that, then you've saved yourself a lot of issues in the future if something goes wrong halfway through drilling a borehole. But that is interesting. I've never come across that before. Um, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting one because I think in my line of work as a civil engineer, and I also support procurement within my organization. So these are some of the issues that we've encountered, and I think particularly when we sort of look at some of these procurement procedures, they're sort of like a guideline, but we're sort of face so many other issues that come, and these are just like guidelines. But I think what I've seen is sometimes, rigs are expensive, especially in my part of the country, in Zambia, by the way. They're expensive to own and expensive to maintain. And so, getting also a license to drill is also very expensive. So sometimes these people make a coalition where one contractor, maybe pays for the license, and then they've got a rig somewhere, someone that owns a rig, but then they operate within that name. So with us, they can probably just show us a lease document, a lease agreement between the two, and we're not in their business. Whatever happens is up to them. But if provided that they provided a lease agreement to us, then that sort of shows an agreement between them as well, and probably we could consider their application when we analyze some of these procurement tenders. Yeah, so maybe just to add on what you said, yeah.
No, that might work where as long as they have an agreement between each other, then that might make it easier when you're awarding the contract then. Yeah. Did anyone else have any comments, concerns with this? Hopefully everyone's just seen as well that it thankfully isn't just us that finds issues. Not finds issues, experiences issues.
Experience issues, yeah.
Yeah, we're not trying to find them. We just end
not
up
looking
being
for
in the
them.
middle of them. But yeah, yeah, what did Millie get to say? Having drilling machinery alone does not necessarily make a company competitive. Yeah, you do want to look at the company as a whole, its capacity, the experience that they have, not just for boreholes drilled, as we were saying from the previous guy, and their overall track record to assess its ability to successfully deliver the required work. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why having this sort of like checklist or brief idea beforehand of knowing what you're expected to go into, and knowing if you have the history of the company, that is awesome as well. Asking them, hey, can we have any potential like well completion reports, to know to what sort of like detail do you guys do it. Like I can tell you for a fact that ours are at least not just 17 pages of just like randomness, but we talk about like depth drilled, water tests done, the lithology, so like the jury 10 feet of it with all the photos provided. We try and make it as detailed as possible, not for our own sake, but for the community and the client, how successful it'll be. Yeah.
Yeah, Josh, I know our time is up, but we have what we call a company profile. Can you hear me? My internet seems to be unstable.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to refer to Hydrologica's company profile that we use just to support what Mulugeta has just said, where it evaluates. I wish I could just share the screen.
Oh, let me stop sharing.
Okay. Yeah, so it would if just so this is a company profile to just evaluate the company, just general information. We want to know about the company name, the contact person, the emails, etc. And then it also asks the years in existence of the company, the number of employees, the tax ID, the drilling license number, just to verify that also they are licensed. And then it then talks about human capital capacity. So we look at how many drillers do you have and how many does each have in terms of experience, the number of geologists or hydrogeologists. And then we also look at the largest diameter of well that they've drilled and the deepest well that they have drilled. And we also look at equipment capacity, like we mentioned, just trying to understand the size of compressor, mud pump, etc., that they have. So I'm just trying to rush through this. And then you're looking at the drill bits, what are the different sizes of the drill bits and types of the drill bits that they've got. And then if they've got materials and supplies, what is it that they have in stock? It tells you something about the supply chain, the company supply chain, and then if they do geophysical surveys, what sort of equipment do they have and the software that they use to analyze that. So this is just to share that when we're assessing an organization, it's a lot of things that we need to look at just to make sure they actually can do the work that we want to.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fadzai. Yeah, so hopefully that's been a little bit of insight to showing that there is a lot more in play that you do try and think about when looking at a company, as Fadzai pointed out, a company profile that we want to do to know, as Mulugeto was saying, that you want to make sure that they do have that relevant experience, because yes, sometimes you might have to give it a risk and go for a new company if there isn't that much options. But if possible, you do want to go for the most experienced one in order for you to have that successful borehole. Because at the end of the day, having that success is the whole reason why you're doing it, for that community, for that client. Trying to think if there's any other questions. No. Does anyone have any other questions, or does anyone have any other questions or queries or comments from what we just chatted about? Well, if not, I'm very sorry, we ran it over time just because we had some issues with the Zoom. We will be checking this time if it's a new update that required it to have a password that wasn't there from last time. I think it's just a security thing that Zoom has. We'll try and confirm that there won't be a password change, and it's the same one that now we've put on the Learn platform. And try and keep that as the same password. But we shall confirm and send a notification out before next week confirming that. But if not, and no more questions, guys, I think we will call it this time, and then Douglas will be talking about Unit 3 next week.
Yep.
Great, if that's all. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Till next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, about the checklist, we'll ask GWC about the company profile. Fadzai, did you see that question? Very last minute.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'll send Catherine a message on GWC to see if that is something that they can put on as an extra document. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Right. Thank you, guys.
Cool. Thanks, guys. We'll end this meeting now.